Good afternoon, everyone. This is Jeff Rumburg. I'm a managing partner with MetricNet, and I will be your host for today's information briefing on the IT Service and Support Benchmark for Higher Education. I want to welcome all of you and thank you for joining our briefing today. Before we get started, I have just a few administrative announcements to make. We have quite a few people in today's briefing, so during the presentation, all of you will be in listen-only mode. This briefing runs about 40 to 45 minutes, so for those who have other commitments later in the day, I should be wrapped up by about 2:45 p.m. Eastern Time in the United States. Some of you on the call today have worked with MetricNet in the past, and many of you have been to our website or attended one of our webcasts or have seen MetricNet present at one of the industry forums, such as HDI or Fusion. But for those who are not familiar with MetricNet, let me give you just a brief introduction. Our core business is benchmarking. We perform benchmarks for a variety of different industries and functional areas. My role in the company is to manage the service desk, desktop support, and call center benchmarks for MetricNet. We've been at this for a long time. MetricNet and its predecessor companies, which include Gartner, Meta Group, and the first company I ran, the Verity Group, have completed nearly 4,000 IT service and support benchmarks. The result is that we now have the largest global database of IT process and performance indicators in the industry. This database covers more than 40 countries. We track more than 70 key performance indicators, everything from first contact resolution rate and cost per contact in the level 1 service desk to mean time to resolve and customer satisfaction in desktop support. We have also created a taxonomy of industry best practices, nearly 120 best practices that characterize those service and support organizations that we consider to be world-class performers. Now, our clients are companies that you would recognize and universities and institutions of higher learning that you would recognize. In fact, more than half of the Fortune 500 use MetricNet benchmarks, and you can see on this chart that we have a significant number of institutions of higher learning that are also very well known. Let's shift gears now and talk specifically about the IT service and support benchmark for higher education. One of the first questions I'm always asked is, why are we focusing a benchmark on this specific and particular vertical market? Well, the first answer is that the demand is there. When we look at our website traffic and those that download white papers from our website, those that attend our webcasts, those that come to our presentations at the HDI and Fusion forums, there is a significant contingent of professionals in IT service and support from higher education. So the demand is clearly there. Also, what we found is that service and support in higher education is very unique, different from any other vertical market. And there's a lot of things that make it unique. One of the things that makes it unique is that many of you hire students to work in your support centers, either as level 1 technicians or desktop support technicians. We call this a student support model. It's very common to be staffed either in part or completely with students, and this creates challenges around turnover and scheduling and training, which makes this unique. The second thing is the huge and wide spectrum of technologies that you're required to support. Most universities have a BYOD, bring your own device policy, at least for students, if not for staff and faculty. And this creates complexity in the support that you have to provide. You have staff, you have students, you have faculty that you need to support. Each of them has differing needs. And your customers are typically distributed very broadly across a large geographic area. At the very least, they're spread across a campus, but in many cases, they're spread across multiple physical locations, perhaps in a city or a state, or even across multiple states within a country, or in some cases, even internationally. So your customers are broadly distributed, and in this environment, we find that service levels are more critical than they are in most other vertical markets. And so we find that there's a unique need to syndicate a service and support benchmark for higher education because the demands of IT service and support in higher education are so unique and different than they are in other vertical markets. Now, just to give you a high-level overview of this benchmark, the months of June, July, and August 2016 we consider to be the sign-up and registration phases. The half price, we'll talk about the fees a little bit later in this presentation. The half price discount will end on the 1st of August. The data collection period ends on August 31st, meaning that the data that we require from you to participate in this benchmark is due on the 31st of August. Now, MetricNet will use the month of September to put together all of the benchmarking reports, and then in October we will schedule individual presentations with each participant in this benchmark, and we will present the results of your benchmark through a GoToMeeting session. Let's talk now about how this project is going to unfold. There are 6 modules, starting with data collection, and we're going to dive down into each of these momentarily. Secondly, there's the benchmark and gap analysis module. We will develop a balanced scorecard, module 3, for every service and support organization that participates in this benchmark. We will conduct a best practices process maturity assessment for each organization. We will develop recommendations. We call these our strategies for improved performance. And then finally, we will document the methodology, the data, and the results of your benchmark in a presentation-style report, much like the report you're looking at here. Let's take a look at each one of these in a little bit more detail. Module 1 involves a project kickoff meeting. We'll schedule this with you individually. This is not a group project kickoff meeting. This is a kickoff meeting that we will schedule just for your organization. Typically, it lasts about 45 minutes to an hour. The goal of this meeting is to introduce MetricNet to the individuals within your organization. We will discuss the project schedule. We will distribute the data collection questionnaire in Excel format and answer any questions that you have about the project. Now, the data collection document is in Excel format. There are multiple tabs you can see. We start with some questions about where the service desk is located and what your hours of operation are. We have a tab on workload profile, operating expense, personnel, operational performance. On average, our clients tell us that it takes anywhere from 8 to 12 hours to complete the data collection questionnaire. Now, that is not an insignificant amount of time, but it's also not something that will keep you tied up for days and days, let alone weeks and weeks. And so the data collection effort is completed in Excel. We recognize that you're probably not going to have all of the data that we ask for. That's okay. Typically, when we get these benchmarking data collection questionnaires back from our clients, they're anywhere from 60 to 80% complete. So don't worry too much if you can't provide all of the data that we ask for. Even for the data that you're unable to provide, we will still provide data from the benchmarking peer group. So for example, if you don't have technician occupancy or agent occupancy, we will still provide that data from the benchmarking peer group, even if you're unable to provide that data from your own service desk or desktop support organization. Let's take a look at Module 2. This is where we actually begin the benchmarking analysis. Now, as I mentioned, many of you have done benchmarking with MetricNet. So for those of you on the line who've already done a benchmark or multiple benchmarks with MetricNet, this will be a bit of review for you. But benchmarking involves comparing your performance to the performance of the other organizations that are in this benchmark. So we compare your cost per ticket, your customer satisfaction, your mean time to resolve, your service levels, your first contact resolution rate, and approximately 20 other metrics. We're going to compare you on all of the metrics that we use in this benchmark, and I'll show you what those metrics are momentarily. The second and more important piece of the benchmark is to diagnose the strengths and weaknesses within your support organization. So if we identify a performance gap, for example, in cost per ticket or customer satisfaction, we want to be able to explain why that performance gap exists. We want to diagnose it, because if we diagnose why a performance gap exists, you can do something about it. If it's a positive gap, you can perpetuate that positive performance. By contrast, if you have a negative performance gap, let's say your costs are higher than the peer group average or your customer satisfaction is below the peer group average, what we want to do is be able to mitigate or eliminate that gap entirely. Now, most improvement initiatives in this industry take place incrementally through trial and error. And as a result, most organizations never achieve world-class performance. It simply takes too long and there's too much effort required. What benchmarking says is that the industry's best practices are pretty well understood and pretty well documented at this point, and so there's no need to improve through trial and error. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can build upon the industry's proven best practices and improve your performance not at an evolutionary pace, but rather at a revolutionary pace. And that's the real power of benchmarking. Now, on page 16, what we're showing are the service desk metrics that will be included in this benchmark. There are 23 KPIs on this page. You can see we've organized them into 6 categories. We've got cost metrics and quality metrics, productivity metrics, technician metrics, service level metrics, and call handling metrics. Now, under the cost metrics, if you have an internally run service and support organization, we're going to look at your cost, either cost per contact or cost per ticket, and cost per minute of inbound handle time. If you have outsourced some or all of your level 1 support, we will look at price metrics. This is the price that you pay to your third-party provider. It would be price per inbound contact or price per ticket, price per minute of handle time. We also consider first level resolution rate to be a cost metric because the higher that number is, the lower your total cost of ownership will be. Now, many people ask us why we look at so many different KPIs when we do the benchmark, and the answer is simple. We want to provide a diagnostic benchmark, not just a comparative benchmark. And what that means is that we're not just going to give you a bunch of data that shows how you compare to the others in this benchmark. We are going to diagnose the underlying drivers of any strength in your support organization as well as the underlying drivers of any weakness. We want to be able to get a 360-degree view of your service and support organization, and by looking at all of these key performance indicators, we can not only identify where the performance gaps are, we can diagnose what drives those gaps. We can get to the underlying drivers of high cost, for example, or the underlying drivers of poor service levels, or the underlying drivers of low customer satisfaction. So by looking at these 20+ KPIs, we can be completely diagnostic in the benchmark that we deliver for you. Now, for those of you who are going to benchmark your desktop support organization, there are 27 KPIs that we're going to look at. You can see that we've organized them into similar categories. We've got cost metrics, service level metrics, productivity, quality, ticket handling, technician metrics, and we've got a 7th category that applies to desktop support. These are workload metrics, tickets per seat per month, incidents per seat per month, and service requests per seat per month. Once again, relatively large number of metrics. The point here is that we want to be completely diagnostic. So we're not just going to compare you to the others in the peer group. We're going to identify and point out where the positive and negative performance gaps are, and we are going to determine the underlying drivers of those gaps. We're going to diagnose why those gaps exist, and that ultimately leads to the recommendations that we're going to deliver for your benchmark. Let's move on and take a look at what some of the output is going to look like for this benchmark. Now, these examples on the next 4 or 5 pages are going to be specific to service desks, but there's a very comparable set of output for desktop support. And by the way, the benchmarking reports typically run about 150 pages. Not that the number of pages should matter, but my point is that these are very detailed, comprehensive benchmarks. They are not surface level benchmarks. You're not going to get 8 or 10 pages of comparative metrics. We are going to provide a very deep dive, again, roughly 150 pages in either a service desk benchmarking report or a desktop support benchmarking report. These are extremely comprehensive and diagnostic benchmarks. Now, this particular chart, a tabular summary of benchmarking results for a service desk. You can see the 6 categories of metrics listed down the left-hand side here. These are the 6 categories of metrics that we saw back on page 16. Then we have the KPIs themselves listed in the 2nd column from the left. And then your performance, this is sample data only, your performance would be shown in the 3rd column from the left. And then for the other organizations in this benchmark, we will show statistics. We will show the arithmetic average, the minimum performance, the median, meaning the midpoint of the distribution, and the maximum, so that you can see how your performance compares to the averages, minimums, maximums, and medians of the others in this benchmarking peer group. Now, this is a very data-rich slide. Some individuals like this a lot because it tells you a lot on one page. There are others that don't like it so much because there is so much data on this particular page. But rest assured, we present our data in a variety of different formats: tabular format, quartile format, bar chart format. Let me show you just some of these other formats in which we will present the data. And the goal here is to present the data in as many formats as possible to facilitate the digestion and understanding of this information. Here are some quartile charts. We're showing cost metrics and productivity metrics on this page. First quartile is always the best performing quartile. The fourth quartile is always the worst performing quartile. Your performance will be shown in the far right-hand column on these tables, and then the dark blue cells represent which quartile you're in. For this particular example, again, sample data only, the cost per contact and cost per minute of inbound handle time are both top quartile, meaning that this is a low-cost organization. The first level resolution rate is in the second quartile. So that's good performance. The productivity metrics, inbound contacts per technician per month and technician utilization, are both in the top quartile. And then when we look at technicians divided by total headcount, that is in the third quartile. So the quartile charts simply present the same information we saw in this table in a slightly different way. And as I mentioned moments ago, we also present the information in distribution format. We want to show you for every KPI in the benchmark, we want to show you what that distribution of data looks like. So the orange bar would always represent your performance on these particular charts. The blue bars represent the performance of the other organizations that are participating in the benchmark. In our hypothetical example here, XYZ University, their customer satisfaction, that's this metric, 84.5%. That's well above the average. The average line is always shown as the red dashed line. In this case, it's 78.4%. We will also place every organization that participates in this benchmark on a two-dimensional chart showing cost on the x-axis and quality as measured by customer satisfaction on the y-axis. Now on the x-axis, we have lower cost on the right, higher cost on the left, and on the y-axis, we have higher quality as you move up the y-axis. Now we've organized this into 4 quadrants. The vertical bisector going through the middle of this chart represents the average cost per contact or average cost per ticket for the peer group of data shown here, the white diamonds. The horizontal bisector represents the average customer satisfaction for the peer group shown here. Now ideally, you want to be in this upper right-hand quadrant. This is where you are both efficient, meaning low cost, and effective, meaning high quality. Now if you're in the lower right quadrant, it says your costs are low, but your quality is also low, and our recommendations are going to be designed to help you move up, that is, improve the quality of your service. If you're in the upper left quadrant, it says that your quality is high, but your costs are also high, and our recommendations will help you move to the right, that is, get to a lower quality point on this chart. And if you're in the lower left, it says that your costs are high and your quality is low, and our recommendations will be designed to help you move up and to the right on this particular chart. Let's move on now and talk about the balanced scorecard. The reason MetricNet developed this proprietary technology a few years back is because there are a lot of moving parts in service and support. You've already seen some of the KPIs that we look at for the service desk and for desktop support. And many organizations have answering a pretty simple question, which is, how are we doing and how are we trending? Well, the balanced scorecard solves that problem by aggregating together a series of metrics, normalizing them, and creating a single overall measure of performance. So in our example here, what we have is a service desk scorecard. We have 6 metrics in the scorecard: cost per contact, customer satisfaction, technician utilization, first contact resolution rate, technician job satisfaction, and percent of calls answered in 30 seconds. You can see that we weight the metrics according to their relative importance. We have overweighted cost per contact and customer satisfaction because we consider those to be the foundation metrics. Cost is a measure of efficiency. Customer satisfaction is a measure of effectiveness. But together, these weightings, of course, have to add up to 100%. The next thing we do is we show the worst performer and the best performer in the benchmark in the third and fourth columns from the left. Your performance would be shown in the third column from the right, and then we calculate a metric score for each of the 6 metrics in the scorecard based on this interpolation formula, which is the worst case minus your actual performance. That's the numerator of the ratio. The denominator of the ratio is worst case minus best case, which is the range. And that will give you a metric score that ranges from 0 to 100%. If you're at 0, it says you have the worst performance in the benchmark. If you're at 100%, it says you have the best performance in the benchmark. And any number in between those 2 extremes tells you how far along the path you are from the worst case to the best case. The final step in creating the scorecard is to multiply the metric score by the metric weighting to come up with a balanced score for each of the metrics in the scorecard. And when we add those together, we come up with a single number between 0 and 100%. Now, when we run hundreds of service and support organizations worldwide through this algorithm, the average score is only about 50%. And we get a nice bell-shaped curve centered right above 50% with tails running off to the right above 60%, tails running off to the left below 40%. Typically, if you're above 60%, you're in the top quartile. If you're in the 50 to 60% range, you'll be in the second quartile. 40 to 50% is generally third quartile, and then below 40% is bottom quartile. Now, what this allows us to do is compare you to others in the benchmark. Once again, sample data. Here is for our hypothetical XYZ University, their balance score of 68.7%. That's the number we just calculated here. You can see the average for this peer group is about 42.4%. That's a little bit low. Normally, we'd expect the average to be up around 50%. And for this higher ed benchmark, we would expect that to be the case, given the number of organizations that are going to be participating in this benchmark. But this particular chart shows overall how you compare to the others in the benchmark. This is among the most important charts that you will find in your benchmark because this gives you a rank ordering of your performance. In this particular case, the 68.7% balance score puts this organization in second place amongst the roughly 30 other organizations that are participating in this benchmark. You can also use the balance scorecard going forward. You can adopt and adapt it for your own organization. This is real data from a client of ours that participated in one of our prior syndicated benchmarks. They simply updated their scorecard on a monthly basis. That's what these blue bars represent. The purple background represents the trailing 12-month average of performance. And you can see that over a one-year period of time, this organization did have some ups and downs, but on balance, they improved their performance over time. So the balance scorecard does a lot for you. It answers the question, how are you performing overall? And it answers the question, how are you trending? Now, as part of the benchmark, we do what's called a process maturity assessment. And the reason we do this is because process drives performance. And if you want to improve your performance, you have to change the way you do business. And what that means is that you've got to modify or revise or adopt or adapt key processes within the organization to achieve better outcomes. Now, essentially, the way this works is as follows. We have identified industry best practices in the areas of service and support strategy, human resource management, process, that is ticket handling processes, technology, performance measurement and management, and stakeholder communication. And what you're going to do is answer a questionnaire. It only takes about an hour to answer, but there are 72 questions in that questionnaire. You're going to answer each question on a scale of 1 to 5. This is much like a CMM capability maturity model. If you answer a 1, it says you have no knowledge of the best practice. If you answer a 5, it says that you are applying that best practice in a world-class fashion. Let me give you an example just in the strategy area. The first best practice is this. The service desk has a well-defined mission, vision, and strategy. Vision and strategy are well documented and communicated to key stakeholders in the organization. Well, the hypothetical XYZ University gave themselves a 4 on a scale of 1 to 5. For the next best practice, they gave themselves a 1. Remember, 1 says no knowledge of that best practice. They gave themselves a 5 on this best practice. The service desk is well integrated into the information technology function. The service desk acts as the voice of the user in IT, and so on. And so this enables us to understand how mature you are in 6 key areas: strategy, human resource management, ticket handling processes, technology, performance measurement, stakeholder communication. We can show you how mature you are on a scale of 1 to 5 in each of the 6 areas relative to the others that are in this benchmark. We will calculate an overall score for you, which will range from 72. If you scored 1 on all 72 best practices, you would have a score of 72. The highest possible score would be 360, which is a score of 5 on all 72 best practices. That would get you a score of 360. We consider world-class performance to be a score of 288 or above. That would be an average score of 4 on all 72 best practices. So 4 times 72 is 288. That's what this green dashed line represents here. The red dashed line represents the average for this particular peer group. The average total process assessment score is 195.7. For our hypothetical XYZ University, they scored 262 points. That is well above average, but it is quite at a level that we would consider to be world-class. Now, as I mentioned a few moments ago, process maturity drives your performance. And let me show you that graphically. On this particular chart, we are showing on the x-axis the process assessment score. Remember, it ranges from 72 to 360. And on the y-axis, we're showing the balance score. Remember, the balance score we calculated earlier was 68.7, and the process assessment score we just calculated was 262. There's the 262 that we just calculated. This chart shows that as process assessment increases in maturity, you would expect to see a higher balance score. These blue diamonds represent data points, and you can see that the locus of points moves up and to the right, which says that increased process maturity tends to drive a higher balance score. We put the process assessment score on the x-axis because the x-axis is sometimes called the independent variable. You have a lot of control over your processes. This is a lever that you can pull to mature your processes over time. Your strategy, your human resource management, your technology, your ticket handling processes, your stakeholder communication, and your discipline of performance measurement and management. And as these processes mature, you would expect to get a better outcome. So the dependent variable, y-axis, is your balance score. And this chart is meant to illustrate the cause and effect relationship between process maturity, x-axis, and the balance score on the y-axis. Once again, you can see that the data points move up and to the right on this particular chart. Now, once we have completed your benchmarking comparison, the gap analysis, developed your balanced scorecard, and completed your process assessment, what we will do is develop our recommendations for improved performance. Now, not surprisingly, these recommendations fall into the same 6 categories that we look at in process maturity. There's strategy recommendations, human resource management recommendations, recommendations around ticket handling processes and procedures, technology, performance measurement and management, and stakeholder communication. Now, typically the action plans include fewer than 10 recommendations. We're not into long laundry lists of things that you need to do. What we want to identify are the things that are going to give you the biggest bang for the buck. That is, yield the biggest improvement for the least amount of effort and the least investment. And so we will identify the low-hanging fruit, the things that you can do in the near term that don't cost a lot of money or take a lot of time, but yield a big impact in performance, because we want everyone who participates in this benchmark to be able to see demonstrable gains in performance and demonstrable improvements overall, literally in a matter of days and weeks, not months or years following this benchmark. For each of you, we will establish performance targets, not necessarily for every single KPI, but for KPIs that you're not tracking, we will establish a performance target. And for KPIs where you are behind the peer group average, we will establish a performance target. These targets are meant to be reached within a period of 3 to 6 months following the benchmark. So anywhere from 90 to 120 days following the benchmark. These represent targets that we believe are very realistic based upon your current performance and the recommendations that we provide for you in the benchmark. The last step in the process is to document everything in a benchmarking report. As I mentioned earlier, these reports typically run about 150 slides. They include, well, momentarily I'll show you what the contents of the report look like, but we document the report in a presentation style format, as you can see, and then we schedule time to present the results of your benchmark. We'll present these results through a live go-to meeting. Typically, these presentations of results last about 90 minutes with Q&A. Now, the deliverables include your project participation kit, meaning a project schedule and the data collection questionnaires. There will be a formal project kickoff meeting just with your company. We don't do a group kickoff meeting. And the report itself, as I mentioned a moment ago, includes the following sections. We start with an overview and the objectives of the project, the background on this industry and how service and support is becoming a more strategic function within IT. We summarize the benchmark in one section, the benchmarking performance summary. We have your balanced scorecard, the process assessment, our conclusions and recommendations, and then in the latter 1/3 of the report, the final roughly 50 pages of the report, we include all of the benchmarking data, a definition for every key performance indicator, as well as the distribution chart for that particular metric, showing chart how your performance compares to the remaining companies in the benchmark. And then we schedule your webcast presentation of results. This is the deliverables that you will receive by participating in this benchmark. Now the project fees until August 1st are $5,000 for one service desk or one desktop support benchmark, $7,500 if you have two service desks or two desktop support organizations or one of each that are going to participate. That's up until August 1st. Now if you have three or more benchmarks, which some of you do, we have a separate project pricing schedule and deep discounts will apply, so ask us about that if you have more than 3 benchmarks that you want to participate in this project. Now after the 1st of August, these fees are going to double to $10,000 for one benchmark and $15,000 for 2 benchmarks. Now for those of you who've done benchmarking in the past, you know, especially at the discounted rate, that this price is an order of magnitude less than any other benchmark out there. First of all, this is the only benchmark in the industry that focuses on higher education. Secondly, if you were to benchmark your IT service and support organization within your institution of higher learning, you wouldn't find a price anywhere close to $5,000, let alone $7,500 for 2 benchmarks. So we know for a fact that this is by far the lowest price you'll find on a benchmark in this industry. But since we're asking you to spend money to do the benchmark, let me give you some economic justification for moving forward with this. Let me start with the general and then I'll move to the specific, and I'm going to start with some qualitative reasons that we hear from our clients who do benchmarking with us day in and day out. One of the reasons they do benchmarking is that they want to get an objective performance baseline versus an external peer group. Benchmarking does that for you. Second thing is that benchmarking will validate, in some cases, beliefs that you have about your service and support organization. So you may believe that you're low cost, high quality, and the benchmark may validate those beliefs, but they may also repudiate those beliefs, meaning that it may show that you're not low cost and high quality. In fact, the benchmark may show that you're higher than average cost and lower than average quality. And so a benchmark will in some cases validate beliefs you already have about service and support, and in some cases it may actually repudiate beliefs that you have about service and support. It gives you a comparison to industry averages and best practices. It's a third-party assessment, MetricNet being the third party, of your strengths and weaknesses, and for that reason it carries a fair amount of credibility within your organization. It gives you gap analysis relative to others in this industry. It will give you recommendations for improved performance that ultimately lead to lower costs and higher customer satisfaction. We provide you with a roadmap for competitive excellence. We tell you exactly what you need to do to achieve world-class performance. If you're performing well, you get bragging rights, and there's a demonstrably high ROI from doing benchmark. And let me show you what that ROI is. There's an approximate 1-to-1 correspondence between benchmarking and world-class performance. And what that means is that the organizations in our database that we consider to be world-class are all benchmarking on an annual basis. And the organizations in our benchmarking database that are not benchmarking on an annual basis have not achieved world-class performance. It's as simple as that. Organizations that benchmark are the best performers. Organizations that aren't benchmarking, at least annually, are not the best performers. We know this to be an empirical fact. Moreover, we know that the ROI, the return on investment of benchmarking, ranges from at least 100%, meaning that if you're going to spend $5,000 on a benchmark, you're going to get at least $5,000 in return, or a gain of at least $5,000. The reality is it's going to be much, much higher than that. Typically, when organizations participate in a benchmark with MetricNet, their ROI is well in excess of 500%, and in many cases it's well in excess of 1,000%, meaning that you get a 10-time return on your investment. In this particular case, if you participate in the benchmark at the half price rate of $5,000, $1,000 or 1,000% return would mean a cost benefit of at least $50,000. That would not be unexpected at all. And so we can pretty much guarantee you that your ROI is going to be far in excess of 100% on this particular benchmark. Let me tell you where that ROI is going to come from. When we think about cost per ticket versus customer satisfaction, what we find is that the data in our database tends to fall between these two lines. We've got a best-in-class performance curve on top and an average performance curve down below. Assuming that you're an average performer, benchmarking helps you do things better, faster, and cheaper. This is not just a cliche. Better means higher quality, faster means quicker resolution times, cheaper means lower cost per ticket or lower cost per contact. Benchmarking moves the needle on both of the key dimensions. It helps you identify cost savings, and it helps you identify opportunities to improve the quality of customer interaction. So benchmarking moves you from some optimal position to an optimized position where you are delivering the best possible benefit for the limited resources that you have. So benchmarking does in fact help you do things better and faster and cheaper. Well, where does the economic benefit come from? Well, one of the things is shift left. This particular chart shows for last year what the average cost of resolution was at different levels within the organization. Incident prevention through root cause analysis, for example, doesn't cost anything, and these are good tickets. They're prevented tickets. Self-help on average is about $2 per ticket, $22 on average fully loaded cost in North America for a service desk ticket. When you push that out to desktop support, the cost increases to around $62 per ticket. Push it out to end level within IT, and you're looking at about $85 per ticket, and so on. Benchmark helps you identify any opportunities that exist to shift left on this chart, to deflect contacts into the self-help channel, deflect desktop support contacts into level 1, and so on. So shift left reduces your total cost of ownership, and this contributes significantly to ROI. We will also, as part of this benchmark, identify opportunities to drive contacts into lower cost channels. If you're trying to develop your chat channel or your web channel, for example, you can see from this data that over time, as you increase chat volume and web and email volume, that your average cost per contact goes down. That's this orange line here that gets interpreted on the right-hand chart here. So channel mix over time can help you reduce your cost per ticket or your cost per contact. This is another source of ROI. The third and biggest source of ROI, though, comes from your ability to make end users more productive. Now, this particular chart looks somewhat complicated, but the concept is pretty simple. We had 60 organizations participate in a benchmark with MetricNet. We organized them into quartiles based on how they performed on a service desk benchmark and a desktop support benchmark. Those that were in the first quartile, 15 organizations are lined up here. That's what these blue diamonds represent. Those that were in the second group of performers are lined up here, third quartile, fourth quartile here. Now, we conducted a classic time and motion industrial engineering study and determined that on average, if you were lucky enough to work in an organization that had top quartile service and support, you still lost on average about 17 productive hours per year due to various IT-related problems, incidents, and service requests. By contrast, if you were unlucky enough to work in an organization that had fourth quartile IT service and support, you are going to be losing an average of 47 productive hours per year as an end user. Now, the difference between a top quartile performer and a bottom quartile performer is about 30 productive hours per year. That can be monetized. Your average employee in North America, for example, costs a little less than $100,000 a year between their salaries, their benefits, and their associated overhead. Now, if you're able to return 30 productive hours per year for the hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of people that work in your organization, there's real economic value there. You can monetize that. And this is the biggest contributor to ROI in service and support. So MetricNet's benchmark can be justified on a number of levels. When we look at ROI, the return on investment on a relatively modest investment of $5,000, assuming that you sign up before the half-price discount ends, it would be inconceivable that you would not get at least $5,000 of value in return. My belief is that you're likely to get a much, much higher return than that through shift left, through improved channel mix, and by returning productive hours to the end users that rely upon your service and support. So what's next? Well, if you have additional questions, I'd encourage you to visit our webpage for the higher education benchmark. And by the way, we're going to be sending a PDF of this presentation out to all of today's attendees. So you'll be able to get this link and you'll be able to go to this webpage and look at the FAQs and the sample deliverables. If you'd like to email us with additional questions, you can do so at info@metricnet.com. But most of all, we want you to sign up for the benchmark, and you can do so also on this particular web page. Let me remind you that the sign-up period ends at the end of August. The half-price discount ends on August 1st, so please get signed up before the 1st of August. Your data collection documents will be due on August 31st. The month of September is when we will conduct all of the benchmarks, and then we will schedule your individual presentation of results through GoToMeeting in the month of October. Now, please don't hesitate to reach out to us if you have any additional questions or comments about MetricNet's IT service and support benchmark for higher education. You can call us in the United States at this number, 703-992-8160, or you can email us at info@metricnet.com. Finally, I want to thank you for participating in our briefing today. Most importantly, I invite you to sign up for MetricNet's IT service and support benchmark for higher education. You'll be glad you did. This concludes our information briefing. Thank you once again. Goodbye now.